Brown, and thanks to all of you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'd like to direct my first question to Assistant Secretary Taylor Colley, if I may. The recent disastrous CrowdStrike incident, I think, exposed the alarming vulnerabilities that can result when too many critical systems and capabilities are dependent on a single source component. And that faulty software update crashed. It apparently crashed over 8 million Windows devices. I mean, airlines were crippled, banking systems, hospitals. It was a mess. A lot of people paid the price for that. My question is, the DoD's industrial base strategy includes efforts to reduce the risks associated with overdependence on a single or potentially adversarial source for national critical capabilities. I'm wondering, how is the DoD thinking about the national security risks that can stem from instances like the crowdsource outage, where there's vulnerability from a single-sourced product that can crash critical systems?
Ma'am, thank you for that question. Single sources of in our supply chains, in our particular defense critical supply chains, remains a huge, incredible risk for our industrial base and for the Department of Defense. In general, for us being able to provide our warfighters with the capabilities that they need at speed and at scale. An issue like the one that you raised with CrowdStrike is one that obviously we all experience. I experienced it myself personally on Monday trying to leave Michigan. But in general, we address sort of our supply chain issues, looking at broadly, looking across the board. We also, through our chief information officer, look at cyber threats in particular. And I want to emphasize the importance of cyber as part of the sources of risk to our industrial base, particularly to manufacturers and as well. As part of the umbrella of the National Defense Industrial Strategy, CIO also issued the cyber, the DoD Defense Industrial Base Cyber Strategy as well. So we continue to look very closely at these and look at ways in which they affect particularly the defense industrial base and how we can intervene.
Thank you. I appreciate your response. I think it was just sort of impossible for most Americans to believe that everything could just be so screwed up because of one software update gone awry. And I think when you think about what that might mean for other, highly important systems that we rely on for so many other things, it's really concerning. I want to ask you another question. This one has to do with on drug onshoring. So the FDA tells us that nearly 70% of the ingredients in medications that Americans take are sourced overseas, mostly India and China, and the finished drug supply is also heavily reliant on overseas supply chains, again, mostly from India and China. So could you talk about what the risks are that are posed by this reliance on foreign manufactured drugs, especially medications like antibiotics, what impact that has on military readiness and civilian health, and what tools does the Department of Defense have to promote domestic manufacturing of these critical medical products?
Ma'am, I want to underline the concerns that you raised, particularly with pharmaceuticals and the effect that they have on our supply chains and ultimately to our warfighters. I don't, in my purview, handle these issues within the Department of Defense, but I also want to note that Mr. Harris also does within the Commerce Department. He may have something to add.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Senator. We absolutely share your concern that we need to be focused on where there are dependencies, where there are single sources of supply, and we have an urgent need to be more proactive and strategic in our approach to supply chains. We all collectively learned lessons in the pandemic, but it's not just about where the market might not function or where the supply might be too brittle of a supply chain. There are also national and economic security risks in these supply chains. You noted a perfect example. Americans expect every day that they would have what they need in the medicine cabinet or on the kitchen table, and the supply chains are what gets those products to point. My team in the Commerce Department and in the new Supply Chain Center that we've created, we've been working with the Health and Human Services Agency and others to try to assess the data and identify what is of greatest concern and who do we need to work with to try to improve resiliency in that supply chain.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I just note that I have two bipartisan bills to address this issue, one with Senator Cassidy, which would provide fundings to antibiotics manufacturers to bring those factories back to the United States, and the second with Senator Cotton would provide incentives to drug manufacturers to produce finished drugs here in the United States by providing higher reimbursement for those products. I look forward to working on those proposals with any of my colleagues who are interested.
Thanks, Senator Smith.
Thank you.
Senator